Talk over drink.
Talks over drinks. Talks over. Okay, so we are recording. Welcome to a special episode of Talks Over Drinks. We have a big gang with us today, and I will let you guys know that this is the official vice presidential candidate forum, and we have a couple of guests with us today, and I'm glad that everybody was able to hook up with us today. And I'm going to definitely start. My name is Corey Fauconier. I am officially stranded in Detroit, Michigan with no brakes on my trailer. So we are sitting still, and that's a great thing because now I can kind of concentrate and not be driving. I'm going to introduce my partner in justice, the guy, Markel Prines. Markel, how are you this evening?
I'm doing very good, brother. It's good to be here with everybody. Hopefully I'm coming in clear. We have a nice panel here, and it's great to be here to be able to get some great information from what I expect to be a awesome discussion.
All right. You have a thought of the day?
Yes. So today's food for action, I would say, is don't let them change your expression and your character.
Okay.
And that's very important for right now because the way I see things going, I scroll through social media and I see a lot of different posts and a lot of emotional outbursts. People are kind of angry on both sides, just to use that term. And I think about what things are going to look like after the election. And I know that there's going to be different expressions on people's faces, but I don't want that to change whatever the results to be. I don't want that to change people's characters for the worse. So I can understand expressions, but maintain your character.
Okay, that's good. That's fair. We'll go down the line. My brother of another color, Jeff Kleb, is back from Germany, back in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Jeff, how are you this evening?
I would say guten Abend. It feels good to be back in the United States without a 6-hour time difference. I'm not up at 11:30 at night trying to stay awake. So
I got you.
yeah, suffered from jet lag and insomnia, but I've been to 35 different countries now on 3 different continents, and there still ain't no place like home. Warts and all.
I understand. Well, we're gonna welcome you back. We got Joshua Huffman. He is a former Libertarian candidate for state senate, 2nd district. Josh, how are you this evening, sir?
Oh, a little tired, but doing well. Greetings from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Yes, I should mention, of course, I'm a former candidate, not a former libertarian. I'm still a libertarian.
Okay, I appreciate that correction. So
don't let them change your character.
So we're going to go ahead and get the guests kicked off this evening. This is our version of a vice presidential forum, and we are blessed to have a couple folks from the what they call, quote unquote, the minor parties, but the independent parties. And again, as most of the folks know, if it wasn't for the Libertarian Party of Virginia, there would not be any Talks Over Drinks. So we're happy to re-welcome Mike Maat, who is the Libertarian vice presidential candidate. Mike, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you and everyone who can hear my voice at the 50th annual observation of the origin of the Libertarian Party of Virginia. It is an anniversary party that will take place on October 19th. I think we said.
Yes,
I want
sir.
you all to be there. I'm told that I will be there and a magician will be there. I take that as an implication from our chairwoman. That means she believes I am no magician. But I will be there and a magician will be there. Jim Turney is on this panel tonight as well. He's not only a buddy of mine, but a former founding chairperson of the Libertarian Party of Virginia and a big important part of the LPVA history. So I hope that he will be there as well. And he's the assistant director for the Chase Oliver for President campaign, of which I am happy to be a part.
All right, Jim, welcome to Talks Over Drinks.
Hey, thanks, guys. Sorry I had trouble getting my microphone to work for some reason. I had to leave the meeting and come back, and it's working now, I hope.
Well, we're happy that you're here, and you always have a space. We may have to invite you so you can talk about the history of the Libertarian Party in Virginia. We appreciate you getting us to talk. Yes, sir.
And you've been part of that history too, Corey. It's a pleasure to meet you in this fashion, but I remember when you ran for House of Delegates about what was 8 years ago?
2017.
Yeah. And that's the same year that I got elected as a Libertarian to my city commission down here in Florida. So, I've managed to get reelected 4 times, so I'm still serving, but wish you had made it, man. That would have been great.
Yes, sir. Well, we'll have to do it again sometime, so we'll keep you posted, and I'm sure Mike will give you our contact information. We love to talk to you again. And finally, Tom Yager, who I'm told is the co-chair of the Green Party of Virginia. Tom, thank you for joining us on such short notice. We appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. I got to appreciate what Jeff was saying about traveling overseas. I was like on a video call with my wife. I was in South Africa, and like it was like a 7-hour time difference, and like I was talking to her, and it was like daytime where I was, and night where she was. You know, it when you can't. It's like, you know, you don't really appreciate the difference until you actually see it on video, and then it feels like you're in 2 different times at once. It's really disorienting.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Well, we appreciate you coming. So we're going to do this. This is going to be very impromptu. We have a couple of, I guess, topics that we want to kind of get you guys talking on. But I'm going to start with Tom, if that's okay, because he hasn't been with us before. Tom, if you could tell the viewers a little bit about the Green Party and what are some of your platform issues that you all deem important.
Okay. The Green Party is an international party. There's Green parties all over the world. The ones that have had the most success so far are in Europe. They've in Iceland, the Green Party was recently part of the governing coalition. It was the 3rd largest party in the country. Like in a lot of countries where there's proportional representation, the Green Party sees considerable success there. Now here in the U.S., our party was actually started in 1984. It's kind of a long story, but in 1996 I think it was 1996 was actually formed the Association of State Green Parties. Was formed in 1996, and then it merged with the Green Party of the United States, which was the other organization in 2001, and basically it formed the Green Party of the United States, which has been in existence since then. The big issues that we have are global warming. We're trying to implement a Green New Deal to prevent global warming from getting worse than it already has. We stand for single payer health care. We're for restoring the civil liberties that were lost at 9/11. After 9/11, we also because of the war on drugs, we favor ending the forever wars, which the Uniparty has delivered us for decades, especially the micromanagement of the Middle East by our military that just brings more misery to the world. And also we also want to make higher education free, and that's a few starters.
Okay, well, we appreciate that.
Sure. Oh, and more local economies. We want to develop more economies to develop locally. There's, of course, international trade is of course not a bad thing. Like, it gets us things from all over the world. But the thing is, we want to develop things more locally, so that way you don't have to depend on corporations thousands of miles away, and you can keep more money in your community. And Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that explanation. Mike, can you give the viewers a little bit of information about party platform issues of the Libertarian Party?
Sure. I don't know if people in your audience need a quick review of structurally about the Libertarian Party, because I think most people are familiar, but we're on 47 state ballots. In the last cycle, we were on 50 state ballots. The Republicans and Democrats got together to make sure that we weren't on 3 of the state ballots this year. Chase Oliver is our presidential nominee. I'm the vice presidential nominee, selected at an open convention. We have chapters, affiliates in every single state. So no one has an excuse not to join the Libertarian Party. What we are all about, as the name might imply, is protecting your liberty, protecting your civil rights, standing up for your right to live your life by your own standards. As the youngsters say, you do you, right? We're extremely skeptical of anyone who would get in the way of that, and that includes the government at all levels, local, state, and federal. Although I should hasten to add, we're most skeptical of the federal government, and one of our basic tenets is to devolve the power of the federal government out to the states, and from the states down to the most local level as possible, so that you as a citizen have as much influence as can be over decisions that are made on your behalf by your government. So, some of the overlap that we see with the Green Party, I was just taking notes. I was really pleased to hear Tom say, restoring your rights that were compromised coming after 9/11. Absolutely.
Right.
The war on drugs, we believe as not only an ethical proposition that no one has the right to tell you what you can do with your body, but as a practical matter. I was a cop for 11 and a half years. I can tell you that as a practical matter, just based on data, just empirically speaking, the war on drugs has been a giant failure, and it's no way to handle a medical problem. He also said that the Green Party was against the forever wars. Amen, brother. And I'm going to guess he'll buy into this idea. Any war. But the idea that these have turned into forever wars is really heartbreaking. And I would say, and Tom, I'm going to guess you'd agree with me, we don't see politicians in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party really taking any foreign policy line that would change in an important way, that would change the militaristic interventions that we see on the horizon. U.S. government foreign policy seems on a railroad track well into the future to continue some of the stupid stuff and unethical stuff that it's been doing in the past. And I would add to that list of restoring your civil rights that have been taken away from you, a whole lot of stuff that came out of the COVID management regime. This idea of telling you that you have to take a vaccine, that you have to close your business, that you have to stay home, that you have to do this, you have to do that. You're not allowed to say this. You're not allowed to say that. Look, I know that people want to do a lot of dumb things. They want to say a lot of dumb things. But I am here to protect your right to say and do dumb things, right? We can all argue about whether taking a certain medication, taking a certain drug is a good idea, a bad idea, whether you should or shouldn't get a vaccine. We can debate all that, but it shouldn't be the government that ends that debate and tells you what to do. That's just unacceptable. And what we spend a lot of time, and I'm about to shut up, I promise, what we spend a lot of time talking about is foreign policy, yes, but we also spend, and this will probably run a little bit counter to Tom's party's way of looking at things, being so skeptical of government intervention. We believe that the economy should run with as little intervention from the government as possible, that the government has been too intrusive, both on a regulatory level and on a tax and spend level, that we need to stop inflation by doing some things fundamentally differently. that begins with capping how much we allow the federal government to spend. It means capping how much we allow the federal government and the Federal Reserve to create in terms of money that creates all of this inflation. There are important changes that we can make, and I believe that we need to do that. As a former professional economist, I believe we need to do that for our economy to work as well as it can.
Jim, do you have anything to add to that? Can Jim hear me?
I'm sorry, what?
I said, can Jim hear me? Do you have anything that you want to add, Jim, before we
Jim is
He's got his
muted.
mic
I
off.
see.
His mic is
Sorry, I didn't hear you were calling on me. I thought you were asking Tommy. But no, as usual, Mike does a very, very good job of explaining, especially the key points. And so, where he started with it, let me end with it. We're all about decentralization of authority. That's really the bottom, that's the foundational principle, if you will. If a local group somewhere wants to run off the rails and violate rights, we're not in favor of that. We work against it, but we believe people ought to have a chance to be wrong but have to pay the consequences themselves. So when I talk about it, libertarianism, I talk about not just decentralization, but individual responsibility, because that's really where the conversation is. We can talk about rights about all day long. Every group has rights they want to proclaim, and that's a good conversation, but it's not a productive one. It just gets eye rolls when you say, I believe in the right to this or that. People are tired of hearing about people proclaiming another right. I believe that it's better to talk about individual responsibility, which of course goes hand in hand with rights. It's a better way to message the ideas that libertarianism believes in, to talk about individual responsibility, personal responsibility. So that's the only thing I have to add, just to double down on that part of what Mike said.
Okay, well, thank you for adding that. So I'm going to start with Jeff. Jeff, do you have a question for Tom and Mike about policy or things that they like to enact should they be elected?
right. Well, there's not a whole lot of daylight between myself and Mike. I mean, we're probably 80 to 90% in sync on things, maybe a couple minor disagreements. As far as Tom, it's good to meet you. Good to have you on our show. I really enjoyed the mock debate that Jill Stein and Gary Johnson had in 2016. That was much better than the debate between Trump and Hillary. I don't know if you were around for that, but I have I kind of have a certain degree of respect for Jill Stein because she says what's on her mind. But a lot of the problems with some of the things that the Green Party espouses is that it's unconstitutional. There's no power. There's the enumerated powers are listed in Article 1, Section 8, and the 10th Amendment reserves everything else to the states. And some of the stuff, the motivation behind it is good, but people say, well, I want the federal government to control healthcare. Well, a state can do that, but it's really going to be hard. I know we have Medicaid and we have Medicare, and we have Social Security, but these things were done outside of constitutional parameters. And it seems like the more government gets involved with it, the more the costs go up, the quality goes down, things get rationed. And do you really want the same people who run the DMV and public housing and the IRS and the public education system to be in charge of medicine? I know the motivation behind it. I get it. But it's just there's these unintended secondary and tertiary effects that kind of get out of hand. And I wanted to ask you what your opinion was on, you talked about protecting civil rights. What about rights taken away from COVID? And what about the federal and state governments trying to take away the Second Amendment rights? I just wondered what your take was on that. Not to be confrontational, I'm just curious.
Sure, no problem. Well, let's see here. The Green Party actually is there are some pretty wide differences of opinion on gun control, like within the Green Party. There's some Greens who view it as who want stricter gun control, but but even what I've seen is actually some things that are like minor, like tightening of like the gun show loophole and things of that nature. It's not things like we want to confiscate your rifles and your pistols and your shotguns. I hear very little talk of that from Greens. It's not. There's basically a support for the basic Second Amendment rights. I think personally, the way I see it is that the Second Amendment is the last line of a defense against enemies, both foreign and domestic. I do believe that there do have to be some like reasonable regulations. For example, like with other amendments, the right to freedom of religion doesn't allow there's some things that you're not allowed to do with that. Like for example, like things that would actually harm other people. And like freedom of speech doesn't cover slander or incitement to violence. So with the Second Amendment, there are going to be some reasonable restrictions, like for example, like on private ownership of automatic weapons and things of that nature. I mean, I can understand, like for example, like hunting rifles, pistols, shotguns, things like that, and definitely yes. So those should be legal, but there are some things like there are reasons, for example, like that there are weapons that are not allowed, and like plastic guns, you don't need those. Like going through there, I really don't see a right to go through a metal detector, like at an air.
Have you ever seen a plastic gun and tried to fire one before?
Not yet. No,
there's no such thing. Can you tell me what the gun show loophole is? People always want to ask what that means. Can you define that?
Yes, it's something that basically makes it easier to buy a gun to circumvent like the background checks that would be that felons actually get for guns.
What is legal at a gun show that's not legal outside of a gun show?
Well, it's easier. It's actually easier to circumvent background checks.
How?
Which are legal.
If you buy a firearm from a federal firearms dealer, he is required by federal and state law to perform a background check and fill out a form 4473. I think what you're talking about is private sales.
Yes,
like if you buy a gun from your neighbor, but that's not legal at a gun show and illegal outside of a gun show. It's just I hear that term all the time, and it's like, what? I just wanted to hear what somebody thought that meant, because it's not something doesn't become legal at a gun show that all of a sudden is illegal outside of a gun show. I guess it's just a media term. It's like assault weapon. It's going to mean 20 different things to 20 different people. And I was just hoping to get a clarification on that. But so many people say that to me, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? Or they say high capacity magazine. Well, what's a high capacity magazine? Well, it's going to depend on the type of gun and the type of caliber. I'm kind of a gun guy, so I don't mean to gunsplain it, but
no.
10 rounds in a Colt 45 is going to be extended, because it's going to extend beyond the magazine well, but 30 rounds in an AR is a standard capacity. It's not high capacity. They're trying to take 10 rounds and saying that, well, that's automatically high capacity, but I don't even know of a semi-automatic pistol that holds exactly 10 rounds. They're usually 7, 8, 12, or 13, or 15, or sometimes 18, but there's so many different Glocks that they have so many different, and they're trying to come up with one size fits all, and I just don't, I don't see how it works. I mean, I don't know what the Green Party official position is, though. Corey, you got anything on that?
Nah, I think you even answered it. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Tom?
Well, let's see here. Well, a lot of the things that the Green Party advocate for. Again, these are not there's no desire to take away anyone's guns. We don't believe that like your pistols or your firearms or your shotguns should be banned. That's not something that I've seen any Green advocate for. I mean, that's simply something that I've seen some people say that the Second Amendment covers only what they, when they say the well-regulated militia, meaning like the National Guard. I disagree with that. Like, people would use the clause of the Second Amendment to say that gun ownership means that we have a National Guard. No, that's silly. I think that's a real stretch. I mean, I can't imagine, people had firearms back in, firearm ownership was very widespread back in the day that the Constitution was written, and it was never construed in that time to mean that, well, you can't have a musket unless you're part of the militia. I don't think so, and that was never construed to mean that way. And
people could own cannons. You could own cannons back then legally.
In that day, yeah, I can understand. Yeah, I would disagree with private ownership of artillery.
Look up letters of marque and reprisal in the Constitution. That was done with private citizens who owned cannons to take out like Barbary pirates and people like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's see that.
Privateers.
Do you have a question for Mike?
A question for Mike?
Or
Josh? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's great to be with you this evening. I'm delighted that we have so many choices on the ballot for president here in the state of Virginia. I was surprised when I heard that the socialist actually made the ballot as well, but be interested to see how that shakes out.
He did.
Yeah.
Yes. I have to say, of course, I haven't been to that many Green Party functions. Before the pandemic, they actually held one in Culpeper that I drove over the mountain to, but I haven't really heard of much in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia.
There you go.
But let's see. Let's see. I guess question. You asked if I had any questions for Mr. Maat. Now my understanding is you're soon going to be in Mississippi, I think, if I read your schedule correctly. And I'm someone who has actually run for office both at the local level and, of course, as mentioned, also for the Virginia Senate. But what would you say about the experience, going to, every or almost every state and meeting with folks, of a wide variety of backgrounds, both libertarians and non-libertarians? I'm interested to hear what you'd say about that experience.
It has been wonderful, and it has been educational, and it is true that I have done that both in the context of seeking the Libertarian Party's nomination, as well as in the context of pushing out the message beyond the party. And as you might expect, those are two really different experiences. We as libertarians take our principles very seriously, and anyone who deviates from them, we kind of wonder how come, and where are the differences, and how do we reconcile this, or are we going to end up mad at each other? Whereas outside of the party, people are, first of all, less consumed with politics on an hour-by-hour basis. People are much more down to earth about what they want the role of the government to be in their lives, right? They are curious about things like, which one of you politicians is going to make our economy better? Which one of you politicians is going to make us safer, both in terms of crime and as a matter of foreign policy? Which one of you politicians is going to be able to do something about inflation and unemployment? Very down-to-earth types of questions, right? Rather than the stuff that we all like to argue about. Like Jeff said, people like to argue about the size of magazines, right? And when you get outside and talk to people trying to make ends meet, you find that they're extremely down to earth. And for this reason, I think that there is a future for libertarian ideals, principles, thoughts, right, and philosophy but only to the extent that I would say this about any philosophy in any party. I'm not singling out libertarians, but only to the extent to which we can connect the dots and make the case that inflation comes from bad public policy. That needs to be said. I'll be curious to see whether either J.D. Vance or Tim Walz is able to articulate that. I was very disappointed, for example, when the Democratic Party candidates chose to, start blaming corporations for inflation, which I actually found a little bit weird and counterproductive. I would have thought they would have been better off saying, we can institute policy to nip this stuff in the bud, but they didn't do that. I'll be interested in seeing whether anyone takes foreign policy by the horns and admits what I think a growing majority of Americans are thinking, even if we don't say it out loud, which is, I don't think our foreign policy has done us right. Right? I mean, as a practical, set ethics aside just for a moment, which is a weird thing for a libertarian to say, because we view all this military intervention as a real ethical problem. But set that aside for a moment and just think about the practicality of it. Has the U.S. government brought us closer to World War III or pushed us, farther away from it? I don't think most Americans feel safer because of our foreign policy as a practical matter. So I think it's up to us to make the case that our way of seeing the world, both in terms of, as Jim said, individuals taking responsibility, devolving power to the lowest level, but also just a fundamental skepticism of politics and politicians and big government. I think our way of seeing things is not just a philosophical matter. I think as a practical matter, people are open to our message, and that's what I'm finding.
Okay. Markel, do you have a question for either Tom or Mike or both?
Yeah, my question is for both. I want answers, the answer from both of you guys. I definitely appreciate you being here to have the discussion first and foremost. And like Mike was just saying, it's the same road that I was about to go down. I was thinking about the whole time, is that how do you restore the faith in our leadership from a citizen standpoint, from a person standpoint who I'm not really counting how many bullets are in the gun. I'm not concerned about that as much as I am concerned about who's going to be sitting at the head of the table talking to the leaders of countries that overseas and doing everything in the world that needs to get done for our country as a whole. I think about it from a perspective of we often put ourselves in the bubble, whereas we're one country and there's over 200 countries on the planet as a whole. And even though we're thinking about locally the United States, I wonder what are we looking at globally? And I want to know that we have leadership in place that we can trust to do things the right way. And how do you guys see us, how do you see any candidate or any presidential person after the election coming in and restoring the faith from the citizens?
See.
Tom, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Well, let's see here. One thing I'd say is well, to help restoring faith is that we get well, not just domestically but around the world, is that we start having a single standard for international law. And for human rights, we stop saying that, well, like, when Putin commits human rights violations, that he gets sanctioned, and when Israel commits them, that, well, why don't we just let Israel investigate itself and get back to us in a year or two, to basically let them get away with it. we need to stop this. We need to stop, like, talking about like our commitment to democracy while giving weapons to more than half the dictators in the world. We need to have our words match our actions, and the best way to do that is to stop the forever wars. Is to bring a lot of our troops home and to stop getting involved in all the wars. That would restore a lot of faith in America, and that would restore it not just around the world, because countries would be seeing that we actually play by the rules, and would also restore faith in America too, because a large majority of Americans do not approve of what's going on, like in Gaza. They do not want us to be funding the war crimes that Israel's committing. They don't want us to be doing all this, but they're just ignored. And we need government that's actually going to be honest about these kind of things. For example, we heard the Biden administration talking about ceasefires, and we need a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Whereas we just found out that that there were some members of the Biden administration that were actually encouraging Israel to invade Lebanon. So when you talk out of both sides of your mouth, that undermines faith.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I think he's exactly right. When you speak out of both sides of your mouth, look, I'm a firm believer in transparency and honesty, and I think that most Americans believe they're not getting either one from their political class. And it's not just, one particular politician. It's not just the president or the vice president. I don't think most Americans think that either party puts up politicians that square with them. There are some, you brought up foreign policy, so we'll stay in that context, but I do think that this same conversation applies to domestic policy. I think that there are some real fundamental untruths that our politicians keep telling us, and it causes them to go down rabbit holes that invariably and inevitably cause them embarrassment. Tom made the point that a lot of people in the United States don't like the idea of us funding the war in Gaza. That is absolutely true. A lot of people don't like us funding the war in Ukraine either. And I think that a lot of people resent not only that there are decisions being made that they don't agree with, but increasingly Americans are waking up to the fact that the way these decisions are made is not the way that they should be made. That the influence of the military-industrial complex that we've been talking about now for 60 years is real, that it does capture politicians, and not in a healthy way, right? You could imagine a universe in which some military-industrial complex captured politicians and it was all for the better. That's not the universe we live in. Our politicians make decisions that you wouldn't make, right? People who are taxpayers and voters and trying to raise their families, they wouldn't make those same decisions. They wouldn't invade Iraq. They wouldn't invade Afghanistan, stay there for 20 years, cost us $1 trillion, cost us thousands of Americans' lives and over 1 million lives in total. This is just not how people in America, or parenthetically anywhere else, would make decisions. And this is how you know that politicians are operating with a different set of values and incentives, because they make decisions that you wouldn't make. And they lie to us about what it is they do. The CIA and the NSA have been lying to us about the things that they have done, the things that they do currently, and the things that they are going to do in the future. We know this to be true, unfortunately. I'm not trying to be conspiratorial in a weird sense. I can read newspapers, and we know that these things eventually come out, because The one thing that they're really bad at is keeping secrets for a long period of time. And maybe they are keeping secrets that we don't know, but we know all kinds of bad behaviors that they engage in over time. So, a lot of it is transparency and ethics, but a lot of it is just telling the truth about the way things work. If a politician would say, imagine if you did nothing different, and we all hope politicians would behave differently, but if you did absolutely nothing different, but you were to stand up in front of a microphone and say, you know what, it is true that the military-industrial complex has too much influence, that their lobbyists, their money, their incentive structures, it's not good for us, that we do end up in too many military interventions that don't work, that don't advance our interests. If a politician would just say that, if a politician would just simply say what we all know is the truth on some level, which is that the biggest lie for the past 100 years is this idea of peace through strength. It's not true. It's one of the fundamental bedrock principles of American foreign policy, peace through strength. It's not true. It's false. It's a lie. Stronger nations are incentivized to undermine peace, to project power. That's just I'm not making an ethical statement. I'm just observing how the world actually works. Imagine if a politician would admit that. Imagine if a politician would admit, American exceptionalism is really nothing but a very fancy word to mean we have all of the power and we don't feel like playing by the same rules as everybody else. And that gets us into a lot of military interventions that are both unethical and impractical from a strategic sense. Imagine if a politician just said that out loud. Holy cow. You would say, boy, I don't know what that fool is going to do in the future, but at least, he's not afraid to tell us the truth.
Right.
Let me ask you this. I'm checking the time. What time did you say you guys have to go, Mike?
I'm looking.
Yeah, he's got to go soon.
Okay, I got to go in 4 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. We appreciate you guys coming. I know that Tom, like I told you, you guys are always welcome at the Green Party, and you have my contact information, and I'm very happy that you answered my email. Sure. If you guys ever need anybody to notarize, we have notaries in my family, and we'll definitely help y'all with that. The one question I have for Jim is, and this probably we have to get you back on. How did you win your election?
Oh, yeah, we don't have time for that in 3 minutes. So, and by the way, I know what you're thinking. I am not the magician who's going to be at the 50th anniversary.
Well, I'm gonna. Mike has my contact information. If I can ask you, Mike, to share it with Jim.
Sure.
I know you guys didn't have a lot of time, but we appreciate the time that you did spend. We're gonna splash your contact information on the screen when Markel does the editing job. And just for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap it up for my partner in justice, the guy Markel Prines, my brother of another color, Jeff Kleb, and my other libertarian brother, Josh Huffman. We appreciate Jim Turney for joining us, Vice Presidential candidate Mike Tremont of the Libertarian Party, and co-chair of the Green Party of Virginia. We are Talks Over Drinks. Remember, it's never too early or too late to toss over drinks. Cheers, and we'll see you next time.